Welcome to another edition of Dave Smith Unleashed. And this one, we weren't scheduled to be on today, but I needed to do an emergency Lakers podcast about what the Lakers do now and what they do next season after the disaster of getting swept in the first round, 4-1 by the Minnesota Timberwolves. And of course, Dave Smith Unleashed brought to you by MTS Transportation, 800-640-6873. Reliable, on-time delivery, compliance you can count on, round-the-clock support, superior communication, experienced logistic partners. Mention the Dave Smith Unleashed podcast and get 20% off your next shipment. MTS Transportation, 800-640-6873. A lot of questions about J.J. Redick. I've been a fan of his this year. I thought J.J. did a pretty good job coaching this team, especially, with the lack of head coaching experience and his first head coaching job being in the National Basketball Association. But he played a long time. He's a smart guy. He was a heady player. You'd think he'd be a pretty decent coach, and I thought he was for the most part this season. But boy, in the playoffs, playing all 5 starters the entire second half in that Game 4 loss to the Timberwolves. And then tonight, see, you can't be stubborn. You can't be a hard-headed a-hole, in my opinion, and be a great coach in the National Basketball Association. J.J. said before the game against the Timberwolves, Jackson Hayes is not going to play tonight. Okay, fine. That's the plan. Good. But, sometimes plans change. You have to coach by the seat of your pants. Sometimes, depending on how that game is going and depending on the circumstances, you've got to change plans. You've got to junk the game plan. You've got to do what's necessary for your team to win. Now, is Jackson Hayes an all-star? No. Is he a great player? No, of course not. But he's 7 feet tall. He can jump out of the gym. He can finish at the rim. He's not bad defensively. He's a really good athlete. Not a good basketball player, but he's a great athlete. And you would think at some point last night, wouldn't you think, with Rudy Gobert, who, he's 4-time Defensive Player of the Year, that's what he does best. But offensively, he's a stiff. And for him to go for 27 points and 24 rebounds, and to clean up everything around the rim, and the Lakers to have absolutely nobody to guard him because they're too small, wouldn't you think at some point, J.J. Redick would look down the bench and say, okay, I was wrong. I think Jackson should have played tonight, and put in the 7'1" Jackson Hayes, at least to put a body on Gobert, at least to bother him, at least to get somebody his own size out there. But he sits the entire game. And here's the rub. He actually put Maxi Kleber in there ahead of Hayes last night. Guy who hasn't played in about 50 games. I've contributed as much to the Lakers this year on the court as Maxi Kleber has. What's he doing out there, J.J. Redick? Wow, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I thought that was a horrendous job of coaching last night. I thought he was stubborn. I thought he was pig-headed. I thought he was hard-headed. You have to admit sometimes you're wrong. Okay, my game plan was incorrect. I said I wasn't going to play Jackson Hayes, but Rudy Gobert looks like Wilt Chamberlain out there tonight. And that can't be. I got to put a big guy on him to try and bother him. But no. He sits him out the whole game, Jackson, and he plays Maxi Kleber. Whew. And the Lakers are so bad defensively. They are. Luka couldn't guard. When you say he couldn't guard a chair, that's an insult to chairs. When you say he couldn't guard Dave Smith, boy, that's the ultimate insult. And he couldn't. I guarantee you I could score on him. Everybody he guards blows right past him. The NBA keeps a stat called blow-bys. It's a stat that a lot of people don't know about. And Luka, last season, led the NBA in blow-bys. And when I say led the NBA, that's not a positive stat. That's a negative one. That means players he was guarding blew by him with the basketball and got to the rim more than any other player in the NBA. And it has to be said, he's fat, he's out of shape, he's a great offensive player. He's going to get you 25, 30 plus every night. He is a sensational, one of the all-time great offensive players in the NBA. But not only could he not guard a chair, he couldn't guard a rock. He couldn't guard a piece of wood on the floor. He couldn't guard somebody in the cemetery. He is awful defensively. And let me tell you something. Austin Reeves isn't much better. And at this point of his career, LeBron James isn't a good defender either. So here's what you call the misery index. Remember, when Ronald Reagan was the president, He came up with something called the misery index, like some numbers he blamed on Jimmy Carter, and for good reason. Well, the misery index for the Lakers is you've got three guys who can't defend in LeBron and Reeves, but at least they give it some effort. And Luka, who's the worst defensive player in the NBA and doesn't even give it any effort, doesn't even try to play defense. So when your three wing players can't stay in front of anybody, and then behind them, the only guy you have on the roster who can block shots and bother shots and play any defense at all, who has size, is Jackson Hayes, and J.J. Redick decided not to play him last night. Unfreaking believable. And I've been saying this since the trade. When the Lakers made the Luka for AD trade, I said at the beginning, I think initially Dallas got the better of the trade. I know everybody was saying this is a steal and this is a theft by the Lakers here. And who knows, down the road, maybe it will be. But I thought initially Dallas got the better of the deal. Now, of course, they couldn't stay healthy, and that's been AD's pattern throughout his career. They went out in the play-in tournament when they had a barrage of injuries. Decimated by injuries, had almost none of their players out there, and Dallas went out in the play-in round. Lakers went out in the first round. What's the difference? They're both out in the first round. And I'll say this again. I like this Mavericks team if healthy, and boy, that's a big if with AD out there. But you look at Anthony Davis, who's one of the top 5 players in the NBA. When healthy, he's a 30 and 15 guy. And then next to him, you could have Daniel Gafford and Lively. Those are basically 3 7-footers out there who can all defend, rebound, and run, especially Gafford and Lively. But how about that backcourt of Kyrie Irving and Clay? Max Christie, whom they got in that Lakers deal, who's a good player, P.J. Washington. I like this Dallas team. I thought this was a team that could possibly come out of the West, if healthy. Now, of course, AD gets hurt. Kyrie tears the ACL. He's out for the year. Clay at 35 is on his last legs in the NBA. But we'll see. Before we start calling this trade a steal and a theft, let's see what happens next year. Now, what do the Lakers do in the offseason? Here's what we need to talk about. How do you get better? Because this group is not good enough, especially defensively. They are just god-awful on defense. Terrible. Evidently, they don't have a very good coach either, even though I liked Redick during the season. Boy, he is one stubborn SOB, isn't he? He is set in his ways, and he will not change, and that's not a good thing to say about a coach. Obviously, they need a big guy. There's talk about Miles Turner from Indiana. He would be great, but I don't know why Indiana would want to trade him because, he's a quality NBA center, and they're into the second round of the playoffs, so they got something good going in Indiana. Walker Kessler, the young kid from Utah, 23 years old. I like him. He doesn't make any money. He averaged a double-double this year, 11 points and 12 rebounds. Yeah, he could be a possibility, depending on what you have to give up. Robert Williams, the former Boston Celtic, who's very good defensively and now plays for the Portland Trail Blazers. He's been hurt a lot. He's okay. One name that popped into my head, you'd have to make trades for all three of those guys, and what would you give up? Would you give up an Austin Reeves for a Miles Turner? Or a Walker Kessler? Maybe for Miles Turner. I don't think I'd give him up for Walker Kessler or Robert Williams because despite the fact that Reeves didn't play all that well in this series loss to the Timberwolves, he had a good year. He averaged 20 points a game, and he's done remarkable things for somebody who was a free agent and undrafted. I like him. He's a good player. One guy I was watching playing for the Houston Rockets last night was Steven Adams. Now, 31 years old, but I think he is exactly what the Lakers need. He blocked 5 shots the other night against the Golden State Warriors. He's not going to score a bunch of points, but that's not what the Lakers need. He's an outstanding defensive player. He's a tough guy. You can't move him. The centers aren't going to back him down and score. All the Lakers need is somebody big and strong that can set a lot of screens, get rebounds, block shots, and play defense. They don't need guys like Steven Adams to score. Rebound, play defense, set screens, block shots. Set your teammates up. And he's a free agent, by the way. You can get him without giving up anybody in the offseason. And how much are you going to have to pay him? He made $12 million this year. I don't know if he can get that in the free market. So I like him. I think Steven Adams would be very good on the Lakers. Now, let's think back to that trade that didn't go through, by the way. Mark Williams with the Charlotte Hornets. Remember, the Lakers traded Dalton Knecht to Charlotte for Mark Williams, who was a 7-footer. He's hurt a lot. He can't stay healthy, but he's only 23 years old. He averaged 15 and 10 this year, by the way, in only 23 minutes a game. Only played 44 games again with the injury problems, but they could have used him tonight against against Rudy Gobert and the Timberwolves. They damn well sure could have used him. And if you're not going to play Dalton Knecht, that's another thing about Redick. Where was Knecht this series? I mean, he can shoot. He's not a bad-looking player. But if you're going to sit him on the bench the whole game, now, I don't. Mark Williams didn't pass the physical when the Lakers traded for him. But that doesn't mean you still can't make the deal. You can revise it. You can go ahead with it. Whatever. We'll make the trade, and we'll wait till he gets healthy. Maybe that's what they should have done, because they sure could have used him last night. Whew. So that's it. The Lakers season is over. That was a tough one, losing in 5 to the Timberwolves. A couple of games that the Lakers very well could have won. But you know what? When you don't play defense, and when you have a coach who's hard-headed and stubborn and doesn't make adjustments during a game, things like that are going to happen. Obviously, they need a big guy, and they need to get much better defensively in the offseason. So the ball is now in your court, Rob Pelinka, in your court. And let's see what the Lakers do. You've gotten my advice, and that should be all you need, because I'm always right when it comes to the NBA, and especially over the years when it comes to the Lakers. Listen to me. I'll be glad to be a consultant, and I'll work cheap, Jeannie Buss. That's it for the emergency Lakers edition. After the playoff loss for Dave Smith and Dave Smith Unleashed, of course, brought to you by MTS Transportation. Reliable, on-time delivery, compliance. You can count on round-the-clock support, superior communication, experienced logistics partners. Mention Dave Smith Unleashed and get 20% off all your shipments. Call MTS Transportation for all your freight and shipping needs at 800-640-6873. We'll talk to you next time on Dave Smith Unleashed.